I want to talk about something that happens on almost every tour I run. There's a moment, and experienced guides will know exactly what I mean when I say this, where someone gets that look in their eye. It's a particular look, and it tends to happen when we're talking about the clans. Their eyes go slightly distant, they tilt their head, and their hand tentatively goes up, and they'll say something along the lines of, "Excuse me, is Galbraith a Scottish name?" Or MacDonald, or Campbell, or Fraser, or Murray, or Hamilton, or any one of the several hundred surnames that have been claimed at various points by various tourists with varying degrees of certainty and one consistent level of hope. In my experience as a tour guide, the question of Scottish heritage comes in two flavours. The first is the person who has genuinely researched it, who knows which parish their great-great-grandmother came from, which clan their name connects to, and who has come to Scotland with a specific purpose. These people are a joy. They have done the work and they want to see the places. The second is considerably more common. This is the person who has a Scottish-sounding surname, has perhaps been told by a relative that the family might be Scottish, and has arrived in Scotland with the energy of someone who is about to claim an inheritance. The hope in their face is remarkable, and nobody wants to be the one that has to break it to them. I am frequently that person, and I have learned to do it gently. The honest truth is that a great many surnames that sound Scottish are not exclusively Scottish. Kennedy, for example, my married name, is Irish as well as Scottish. The name exists on both sides of the water and has done for centuries. What I tell guests with complete accuracy is that the Kennedy clan was indeed based in Ayrshire in the southwest Scotland, Carrick specifically, and that they were a significant force in that area for hundreds of years. What I sometimes omit, in the interest of a pleasant afternoon, is that their name may have arrived from Ireland in the first place. Scotland and Ireland, historically, have a complicated and frequently blurred border when it comes to names, people, and who's claiming what. The Kennedys appear on both sides of that water, and have done for centuries. I'm choosing to focus on the Scottish connection, partly because this is a Scottish podcast, and partly because North Lanarkshire, where I live, was largely built by Irish immigrants, which means that if I start pulling on that particular thread, I may end up in a very different episode entirely. We'll leave that one for another day. Today's episode is for everyone who has ever wondered whether their surname connects them to Scotland. For everyone who loves Scottish history and wants to understand how the clan system actually worked, and for everyone who has stood in front of a wall of tartans in a gift shop and had absolutely no idea what they were looking at. We're going to sort it out, all of it. I'm Lesley Kennedy, this is Everything Scotland, and today, the clans. First things first, what actually is a clan? Well, the word comes from the Scots Gaelic clan, which means children or family, and that is essentially what a clan was, an extended family unit organised around a chief, occupying a specific territory and operating on a system of mutual loyalty and obligation. The chief owed protection to the clan owed military service to the chief. Everyone was, at least in theory, related. In practice, as anyone who has ever met a large family will understand, the reality was considerably more complicated than the theory. The clan system was primarily a Highland and Island phenomenon. The Lowlands had a different social structure, more influenced by feudal European models, more connected to the Scottish crown, less reliant on kinship as the organising principle of society. When people picture Scottish clans, they are picturing the Highlands, the Tartans, the Glens, the chiefs in their castles. The Lowlands had their own version. We will come to the border clans later, which are very different and an extremely entertaining story. But the classic clan image is Highland. At its peak, the clan system covered hundreds of clans of varying sizes. The great clans, Campbell, MacDonald, Fraser, Mackenzie, Gordon, Stewart, commanded thousands of men and vast territories. The smaller clans might consist of a few hundred people in a single glen. All of them operated on the same basic principle: loyalty to the chief above everything else, including, on occasion, the law. The thing that I find most interesting about the clan system, and the thing I think gets lost in the romantic version of it, is how practical it was. This was not primarily a cultural arrangement or statement of identity. It was a survival mechanism. In the Highlands, where the terrain was harsh, the winters were brutal, the central government was distant and frequently unreliable, and your neighbours might at any point decide they wanted your cattle, belonging to a clan was the difference between having protection and not having it. The chief wasn't just a figurehead. He was responsible for his people in a very direct and immediate way. He settled disputes. He led men into battle. He negotiated with other chiefs on behalf of the clan. He was essentially judge, general and landlord simultaneously, which sounds like an enormous amount of work, and it was. The ones who did it well were remembered for centuries. The ones who did it badly tended to be remembered for slightly different reasons. One thing that surprises people, and that is worth knowing before you go searching for your Scottish surname, is that not every member of a clan shared the same surname as the chief. Not even close. In fact, a significant number of people living under the protection of a clan had completely different surnames for a variety of entirely practical reasons. Some were descendants of families who had simply lived on the clan's territory for generations and had taken the clan's protection without taking the name. Some had their own ancient family name and saw no reason to change it. Some were absorbed into a clan through marriage, alliance, or simply the geography of living next to very powerful people. And some had names that were derived not from a family line at all, but from a trade, a physical characteristic, or a place. So the blacksmith became Smith, the red-haired man became Reed, the person from the hill became Hill. These people might live entirely within clan territory, fighting for the chief, and consider themselves fully part of the clan without ever bearing the chief's surname. These groups of families associated with a clan but bearing different names are called septs, and this matters enormously if you're researching Scottish heritage, because it means that a surname that does not obviously match a clan name might still have a clan connection. Robertson, Donachie, and McRobbie, for example, are all septs of Clan Donachie. MacPhail, MacRae, and Gilchrist are associated with various clans despite not sharing a chief's surname. So if your surname research draws a blank when looking for a direct clan match, it's worth checking whether it appears in a sept. I mention this because I've watched guest faces fall when told their surname does not appear to match any clan, and then watch those same faces recover entirely when the sept connection is explained. Scotland, as it turns out, casts the net rather wider than most people assume. There's a reasonable chance that you're in there somewhere. The clan also had a clan seat, a castle or stronghold that served as the chief's residence and the symbolic heart of the clan. These castles are among the most visited in Scotland today, and for good reason. They are extraordinary buildings with extraordinary stories, and in many cases, they are still occupied by the same families they have belonged to for centuries. One such place that I have been to countless times is Inverary Castle, the seat of the Dukes of Argyll, chiefs of Clan Campbell, near to Loch Fyne in Argyll. And I want to tell you about the approach, because the approach is part of the experience. As you come along the road which borders Loch Fyne in towards Inverary, ahead of you in the distance you can see the town. the beautifully preserved Georgian town planned and built by the 3rd Duke of Argyll in the 18th century. Because when you're Chief of Clan Campbell, you can occasionally just build yourself a new town. You cross a narrow bridge, and as you cross, if you glance to your right, you catch the briefest glimpse of the castle through the trees. Just a flash, towers and turrets behind the woodland, and then it's gone. The entrance to the castle grounds is on the right-hand side just before the town, which continues on slightly further to the left. You would almost not notice the turn. The driveway takes you through woodland, trees on both sides, closing over the road, with the castle hidden somewhere ahead. And then the trees open up, and there it is. It looks like someone drew a castle the way a child draws a castle. Towers at the corners, pointed turrets, grey-green stone, perfectly symmetrical, sitting on its lawn, with quiet confidence of somewhere that has been there since 1746, and sees no reason to be modest about it. I have watched a lot of people see it for the first time. Nobody is ever unmoved. Some people go quiet, some people immediately reach for their phone, some people just stand there with their mouth slightly open, which, honestly, is the correct response. It's that kind of building. Right, the feuds. Because no episode about Scottish clans would be complete without the feuds, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Scotland's clan history is, to a significant degree, a history of who was angry at whom and what they did about it. The reasons were various: disputed land, stolen cattle, a bad marriage alliance, an insult that could not be overlooked, or occasionally just the fact that a neighbouring clan existed and had things your clan wanted. The methods were consistent: violence, counter-violence, and the occasional attempt at peace that ended with someone being stabbed. The most famous feud in Scottish clan history is the one between the MacDonalds and the Campbells, and it's famous for good reason. It lasted in various forms for centuries, involved every kind of conflict from cattle raids to full-scale battles, and culminated in an event in 1692 that is still spoken about in the Highlands today: the Massacre of Glencoe. In February 1692, a detachment of government soldiers, many of them from the Campbell clan, arrived in Glencoe, home of the MacDonald clan. They were received as guests. The MacDonalds fed them, housed them, shared their homes with them. For 12 days, the soldiers ate at the MacDonald's table and slept under the MacDonald roof. On the 13th day, before dawn, they killed them. 38 MacDonalds were killed in their beds. More died in the snow trying to flee, women and children among them. The orders had come from government in Edinburgh, and the justification was that the MacDonald chief had been late in swearing an oath of loyalty to the crown. Late, by a few days due to a bureaucratic complication. 38 people killed in their homes after 12 days of Highland hospitality because of a paperwork delay. What made it particularly devastating, and what Scotland has never quite forgiven, was the violation of Highland hospitality. In Gaelic culture, to accept someone's food and shelter was to accept an obligation of protection. You did not harm the people who fed you. The soldiers had eaten at the MacDonald table. That made what followed not just murder, but betrayal of the deepest kind. The phrase still used in Scotland for an act of treacherous hospitality is Glencoe. That's how long memories are here. I want to be honest with you about Glencoe as a place, because I think it's important. The landscape is stunning, genuinely, breathtakingly dramatic, one of the most powerful stretches of scenery in Scotland. And it carries the weight of what happened there in a way that's difficult to describe, but is immediately felt. I've driven through Glencoe many times with guests, and there's always a moment of quiet. Not because I tell people to be quiet, just because the place asks for it. The mountains do something to you. The history does something else. Together, they're quite a lot to sit with. The Campbells, for what it's worth, were following orders from a government that wanted to make an example of a clan that was slow to comply. The full blame belongs considerably higher up the chain than any individual clan, but the Campbells were the instrument of it, and in the Highlands that has been remembered. If you go to certain parts of Scotland today and put a sign up saying, "No Campbells," people will nod. History here has a long half-life. Now, away from Glencoe and towards something considerably more entertaining, because the MacDonald-Campbell feud, for all its drama, is not the most operatically ridiculous feud in Scottish clan history. That distinction belongs, in my professional opinion, to the Johnstons and the Maxwells. The Johnstons and the Maxwells were border clans, not Highland, but from the Scottish borders, that complicated strip of territory between Scotland and England that was, for several centuries, essentially lawless. The border reivers, as these clans were collectively known, were cattle thieves, raiders and feuders of quite extraordinary dedication. The word bereaved comes from the reivers. The word blackmail comes from the reivers. They were, in other words, a significant contribution to the English language, even if the contribution was largely criminal. The Johnson-Maxwell feud had been running for years. Raids, counter-raids, the usual. When both sides agreed to meet to resolve it, a peace agreement, a fresh start. Two clans setting aside their differences in the interests of a quiet life. At that peace meeting, the Maxwells ambushed and killed the Johnson chief. The Johnsons, understandably, considered this a breach of the peace agreement. What followed was one of the largest clan battles in border history, the Battle of Drift Sands in 1593, in which the Johnsons killed approximately 700 Maxwells, including the Maxwell chief. The Maxwell chief was captured trying to flee and was killed. His hands were reportedly cut off first because the Johnsons wanted him to understand specifically what they thought of the peace meeting. The feud then continued for another generation, because, of course it did. I tell guests about the border reivers on tour occasionally. The reaction is always the same, a kind of delighted disbelief. Scotland's feuds have an operatic quality that is very difficult to achieve by accident. These people were not trying to be dramatic. It just came naturally. Right, the Tartans. The bit everyone has been waiting for. The thing that is in everything in every gift shop in Scotland and that everyone associates with the clan system. I need to tell you something about the Tartans. It will not ruin your enjoyment of them. In fact, I think it makes them much more interesting. But it will require you to slightly adjust your mental timeline. The idea that every clan has its own specific tartan pattern for centuries, passed from generation to generation, worn as a mark of identity since time immemorial, is, to put it delicately, not entirely accurate. Tartan itself is ancient. Woven checked wool has been found in Scotland dating back centuries, and there are historical references to Highland people wearing checked cloth going back to at least the 16th century. Nobody disputes the antiquity of tartan as a textile tradition. What is considerably less ancient is the idea that specific patterns belong to specific clans. The system, the registered clan tartans that you see in the shops, the idea that the Kennedy tartan is this specific arrangement of colours and the MacDonald tartan is that one, largely dates to the 19th century, specifically to 1822. You'll remember from episode 5, the Highland Games, that in 1822 King George IV visited Edinburgh. Sir Walter Scott organised the whole thing. It was a spectacular pageant of Highland culture, kilts and tartan and pipe bands, and it was enormously influential in making Highland dress fashionable. it was also, in many cases, invented on relatively short notice. Clan chiefs who had not worn tartan in generations, who lived in Georgian townhouses and dressed in the fashions of London, suddenly needed a clan tartan for the royal visit. Textile manufacturers provided them, enthusiastically. The Highland societies codified them. The romance of it all was so appealing and the market was so substantial that the system expanded rapidly. By the time Queen Victoria started spending her summers at Balmoral and made Highland culture the passion of the British Empire, the clan tartan system was firmly established as an ancient tradition. It was, in many respects, about 40 years old. Does this make the tartans less meaningful? I genuinely don't think so. The textile tradition is real. The clan identities are real. The sense of pride and connection that people feel when they wear their family tartan is real. The fact that the specific pattern was registered in 1822 rather than 1322 does not change what it represents to the people who wear it. Some of the most powerful cultural symbols in the world were invented relatively recently. The important thing is what they mean, not how old they are. What I do find slightly funny about the tartan system, and I say this with complete affection, is the number of tartans that now exist. There are thousands. Clan tartans, family tartans, district tartans, corporate tartans, national tartans. Scotland has a national tartan. Various football clubs have tartans. There is, I believe, a tartan for almost every conceivable group of people who might want one, which is either a testament to Scotland's extraordinary textile tradition or evidence of a very effective marketing operation. I'm not entirely sure which. My own clan tartan, Kennedy, does exist, and it's a bonny thing. Dark green, navy and red with a yellow stripe. I know this because my husband and son have matching Kennedy kilts, which is either a touching display of clan loyalty or evidence that someone in my household takes us considerably more seriously than I do. I am a Kennedy by marriage rather than by birth. I have not traced the family tree, and I believe the family connection is to Carrick and Ayrshire. Beyond that, I'm working largely on good faith and a certain amount of optimism, which seems appropriate for clan heritage generally. I want to mention something that often surprises people. The suppression of the clans did not begin in 1746 at Culloden. Some clans were outlawed considerably earlier, and none more dramatically than Clan MacGregor. The MacGregors were one of the oldest clans in Scotland. They had occupied land in Perthshire and Argyll for centuries, and in 1603 the Scottish Crown did something that had never been done before, and has never quite been done since. It banned the clan's name entirely. Not the clan, the name. To call yourself MacGregor was, from 1603, a criminal offence. The punishment for using it was death. Members of the clan were required to take different surnames: Murray, Grant, Stewart, whatever their neighbours were called, or face prosecution. Marriage ceremonies between MacGregors were forbidden. Gatherings of more than 4 MacGregors at a time were illegal. The Crown was not trying to punish the clan, it was trying to make the clan cease to exist by removing the name that held it together. The ban lasted, on and off, for nearly 200 years. It was lifted in 1775, and the MacGregors, who had spent nearly 2 centuries officially not existing, immediately reconstituted themselves, re-registered the name and carried on, as if nothing had happened, with what I can only describe as magnificent stubbornness. The most famous MacGregor of the outlawed period is Rob Roy MacGregor, outlaw, folk hero, cattle dealer of considerable flexibility, and the subject of a Walter Scott novel that made him a legend. Rob Roy was born in 1671, spent much of his life officially not having a surname, and died in 1734, still not officially having a surname, and is now one of the most recognisable figures in Scottish history. The name was banned for nearly 2 centuries and is now on whisky bottles, tourist signs, and a rather good film starring Liam Neeson. The name was banned for 200 years. They were forbidden to gather, forbidden to marry, forbidden to exist in any official sense. And what did Scotland do with that story? Put it on a whisky bottle and gave it to Hollywood. I genuinely can't decide if that is triumphant or absurd. Possibly both. Probably both. The MacGregors were the most extreme example, but they weren't alone. Several smaller clans and family groups were proscribed or suppressed at various points in Scottish history, usually for a combination of feuding, cattle theft, and the general crime of being inconvenient to whoever was in charge at the time. The message from the authorities was consistent: stop being a clan. The response from the clans was equally consistent: a resounding no. Which brings us neatly to what happened after Culloden, when the government tried, more systematically than ever before, to end the clan system entirely. We talked in episode 2 about Culloden and the Jacobite defeat of 1746. We talked about the Disarming Act, the Dress Act, and the systematic dismantling of Highland culture that followed. But I want to return to it briefly here, because what happened to the clan system after Culloden is directly relevant to why we are having this conversation today. The British government understood, correctly, that the clan system was the mechanism that made the Jacobite rising possible. Clan chiefs called out their men. The men followed. The loyalty structure of the Highlands made it possible to raise an army quickly from a relatively small population. To prevent that happening again, the government went after the system itself. The Heritable Jurisdictions Act of 1746 stripped clan chiefs of their legal powers overnight. Men who had been patriarchs with genuine authority over their people, who had settled disputes, administered justice, and carried real responsibility for the welfare of the clan, became simply landlords. Their people, who had farmed the land for generations under the clan system's mutual obligations, became tenants. Tenants had no protections. Tenants could be moved. And moved they were. The Highland clearances, which we will explore fully in another episode, began in this moment. The clan system had kept communities on their land for centuries. Once it was gone, nothing stood between the landlords and the economics of sheep farming. The glens that had been full of people became empty. Some of those people went to the cities, many more went on ships. Which is why, today, there are more people of Scottish descent outside Scotland than inside it. Canada, America, Australia, New Zealand. The Scottish diaspora is enormous, and a significant part of it traces directly to the destruction of the clan system after 1746. When someone on tour asks me if their surname is Scottish, the answer is often yes. And the reason they are asking from the other side of the world, rather than from a glen in the Highlands, is the reason we are talking about it right now. I think about this a lot when guests ask about their surnames. There's always that hope in the question, the sense that a Scottish name might connect them to something. And it does. It connects them to a place their ancestors left, often without much choice in the matter. The surname is what survived the journey. Everything else, the glen, the community, the language, the specific piece of land their family had farmed for generations, most of that didn't make it onto a ship, but the name did. And I find that quite remarkable. And I'm always glad when people come looking for it. Here's the thing about the clan system that surprises people most. It didn't end. It was dismantled, suppressed, stripped of its legal powers and its lands, and it continued anyway. Because ultimately the clan system was never primarily a legal structure, it was a cultural one. And cultures are considerably harder to dismantle than laws. Today, almost every major Scottish clan has a clan society, an organisation that maintains the clan's history, connects members of the diaspora with each other and with Scotland, organises clan gatherings and keeps the chief's position alive and meaningful. Many clan chiefs still exist. The Duke of Argyll is still the chief of Clan Campbell. The MacLeod chief still lives in Dunvegan Castle in Skye, which has been continuously occupied by the MacLeods since the 13th century. Not all chiefs live quite so dramatically, but the position has survived. Clan gatherings happen across Scotland every year, and across the world. In America and Canada especially, Scottish heritage organisations organise Highland Games and Clan Days where people of Scottish descent gather specifically to connect with their heritage. We talked in episode 5 about how the Highland Games spread globally through the diaspora. The clan societies are part of the same story. Scotland's people, scattered across the world, finding each other through shared history. Dunvegan Castle in Skye is perhaps the finest example of what a clan seat looks like when the clan has never left. The MacLeods have been at Dunvegan since the 13th century, not intermittently, not with gaps, but continuously, generation after generation, for over 800 years. The current chief still lives there. It is the oldest continuously inhabited castle in Scotland, and it feels like it. Not in a decrepit way, in the way that a place feels when it has been genuinely lived in for 8 centuries, rather than preserved for display. There are rooms open to the public, and rooms that are very clearly not, and the castle holds some extraordinary things, including a fairy flag, a piece of ancient silk that the clan has carried into battle for centuries and which is said to have magical protective properties. Whether you believe in magical silk is a personal matter. What is not in question is that the MacLeods have kept this thing safe for somewhere between 500 and 1,000 years, depending on which historian you ask, which is a level of organisational commitment that most families couldn't even manage with a spare door key. The tartan industry, which we have already established is considerably newer than advertised, generates substantial revenue for Scotland and keeps a genuine textile tradition alive. The kilt is worn at weddings, at Highland Games, at formal events across the world. The clan system that was suppressed after 1746 has, through a combination of Victorian romanticism, diaspora loyalty and the sheer stubbornness of Scottish cultural identity, ended up more globally recognised than almost any other aspect of Scottish culture. And there's something very Scottish about that. The British government spent the best part of a century trying to dismantle the clan system, banning the names, the dress, the weapons, the legal powers, the entire structure of it. Scotland turned the whole thing into a global brand, and then sold them the tartan. A quick practical guide before we get to the listener's stories, because I know the question is coming. If you want to research your Scottish surname, whether it connects to a clan, where the clan was based, what the tartan is, whether there is a clan society you can join, the best place to start is the Court of the Lord Lion, which is Scotland's heraldic authority and maintains the official records of Scottish clan recognition. The website is clear, authoritative and free to search. It will tell you whether your name connects to a recognised clan, a sept, which is a smaller family group associated with the larger clan, or whether it is simply a Scottish surname without a specific clan connection. The second thing I will say is, manage your expectations slightly. Not every Scottish sounding name connects to a dramatic clan history. Some names are simply common Scottish surnames with no clan affiliation. This is not a disappointment. It just means your ancestors were ordinary Scottish people getting on with their lives rather than feuding with the Maxwells. which is probably for the best. And now to listener stories. The first one is from Yuki in Tokyo. And Yuki says, I came to Scotland because of whisky. I have been collecting Scottish single malts for many years, and I thought I understood Scotland, a place that made excellent whisky and had dramatic scenery. I wasn't prepared for the people. On my second day, I got on the wrong bus in Inverness and ended up somewhere I did not intend to be. 3 different people helped me get back. One of them drove me part of the way. I didn't expect that. I have been back to Scotland twice since. The whisky is still excellent, but the people are better. Yuki, that is Scotland doing what Scotland does best. I'm glad you found that out on day 2 rather than having to wait for it. Next, there is Andre from France, and he says, I visited Scotland 6 years ago on a cycling trip through the Highlands. On the 3rd day, I got a puncture on a very remote road and stupidly had nothing to fix it with. A man with a van stopped and offered to help. He put my bike in the back and took me to the nearest town where I could find something to repair the tyre. He refused to take money and he spent 20 minutes telling me all about the area, where to stop, what to see, what to avoid, and we have been in contact ever since. He has come to my home last year with his wife and I took them to the wine region. He brought me a bottle of whisky. Scotland gave me a friend that I didn't know I needed on a road in the middle of nowhere. Who would believe it? Andre, Ewan sounds like exactly the kind of person Scotland makes in considerable numbers and exports very poorly. I hope you have many more visits in both directions, and the whisky for wine exchange is one of the finest diplomatic arrangements I think I've ever heard of. And the last one here is from Mike in Sydney. Mike says, I had haggis for the first time at a pub in Edinburgh, and I want to be clear that I had been avoiding it for 3 days. I was travelling with my wife, who is of Scottish descent, and who I thought I could trust. She told me it was absolutely fine, I would love it, and I was being ridiculous. She was right on all 3 counts. It was lovely. Moral of the story, fellas, is that haggis isn't that bad, and your wife is always right. Mike, you're entirely right. Haggis isn't that bad and your wife is always right, especially if she's Scottish. And that brings us on to our Scottish word of the week. And this week, thrawn. T-H-R-A-W-N. Thrawn. It means stubborn, contrary, twisted, resistant. Someone who will not be told. Someone who will hold their position regardless of logic, evidence, or the overwhelming opinion of everyone around them. Dinna be so thrawn. Don't be so stubborn. He's a thrawn wee soul. He's an obstinate individual of small but significant determination. I have chosen it this week because it is, to my mind, the defining characteristic of the clan system. Thrawn. The clans were suppressed after Culloden. They came back. The Tartans were largely invented in 1822. They became a global icon. The diaspora was scattered across the world. They kept coming back to Scotland. Generation after generation, century after century, finding their way back to the surname, the tartan, the glen, and the history. That is thrawn. And Scotland is very, very good at it. Next week on Everything Scotland, we're doing something completely different. No battles, no feuds, no suppression acts. We're going into the darker, stranger, considerably more entertaining corners of Scottish culture. Myths and legends. Nessie. And I promised you this one in episode 1, so here we are. The Kelpies, the shape-shifting water horses that lurk in Scottish lochs and rivers and have no good intentions towards anyone. The Selkies, the seal folk of the Hebrides, whose stories are amongst the most quietly heartbreaking in Scottish folklore. The Echushka, which makes the Kelpie look friendly by comparison. And the question I said I would remain professionally neutral on, is there something in Loch Ness? 37 kilometres long, 230 metres deep, more fresh water than all of the lakes in England and Wales combined. I've never seen Nessie, and I've also never seen the bottom of Loch Ness. Make of that what you will. It's a fun one, and I cannot wait. But before I go, if you're enjoying Everything Scotland, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with someone who loves Scotland or who has been wondering about their Scottish surname. This week's episode in particular is one to send to the Americans and Canadians in your life. They will have feelings about it, probably several. Find us on social media at Everything Scotland Official, and keep the listener stories coming. Every single one is read and every single one is appreciated. I'm Lesley Kennedy. This is Everything Scotland. Slán